but the focus really was on biblical languages because they take a long time to learn. So, although this is a very old-fashioned notion and very few people have, believe this anymore, this has really been who I am. I really take that seriously, that the Bible is the center of our tradition, and somebody needs to be able to read it in the original languages to interpret it to the congregation. So that's what I've done in my scholarly life. That's what I've done in my my life in the church. Not that I've not done other things as well, but it really is, it's my focus, and it comes out in everything I do, whether it's pastoral or my adult ed classes or preaching. When I preach, it's a little bit more like a lecture, although that's not entirely true. Sometimes my students tell me when I'm teaching, preach, doc, they say when I start getting passionate about something. But anyway, it's the two are kind of interchangeable for me. And it's partly because of that sort of ultimate reformed perspective that I don't know how I got it exactly, but it's anyway, that is what it is. So you all have, I think, a document that has timelines on it. And you might notice that the front page has some nice little color pieces on it in terms of the different judges. And if you look at that closely, like take Othniel, he's the earliest judge. And all of the different sources listed there have him somewhere in the 14th century, right? Now, if you turn the page and look at what I sent, which is from John Collins' textbook, down under Iron Age 1, period of the Judges, 1200 to 1020. So you see, there's a difference of opinion among scholars as to how to date, not just the judges, but a lot of this stuff. Because like in John Collins, he has the Exodus, 1290 to 1250, question mark. This earlier material, we don't know for certain. We're making educated guesses based on some archaeological evidence and various different things. But the later we move, the closer to the present we get, the easier it is to be relatively certain. The older we get, the harder it is to be sure. And that's why you get these discrepancies. But I just wanted to point that out, that you've got different opinions on these sheets that are in front of you. And it looks like a lot of stuff. You look at this, you say, wow, how do you remember all that stuff? I don't. But there are certain things that you do remember, like again, on the first page of John Collins, under Iron Age 1, it says United Kingdom. This is like under a period of the Judges, 1000 to 922. Well, 922 is when when Israel broke in half. And after that, you had a northern kingdom that was called Israel and a southern kingdom called Judah. So that's an important date. Maybe we forget a lot of other dates, but that date stays in my head. And similarly, in 722, which is on here somewhere, that may be in the next page. Yeah, right, sort of right before where it says Kingdom of Judah, 722 to 587, right above there, Samaria falls to Assyria, 722, 721. That's a big date. That's the end of the Northern Kingdom. So there's some big dates that are easy for me to remember, even though a lot of these other dates don't stay in my head. And again, the fall of Jerusalem at the beginning of the Babylonian exile, 587, 586. These sort of are like bookends in which a lot of other stuff happens, some of which I remember, some of, excuse me, some of which I don't. And nobody else does either. Nobody remembers all of this stuff. That's why you have these sort of cheat sheets to help you remember the stuff that you are not an expert in. Anyway, that's just wanted to mention that about the timelines. And then one other thing that I forgot to put on the notes that I sent, and did you all get the notes that I sent? No?
You mean the ones back here?
No, I sent some other notes that were in response to questions, I thought. No? Okay, what's that?
I said yet to be distributed.
Okay, I'll.
To whom did you send it? Oh, to you.
Yeah.
You didn't get it.
I don't think so.
You got red, Scott.
Okay, I'll, because I don't even remember at this point exactly what all was on there. But I mean, I know there were timelines, but I thought there was something else too, maybe not. Anyway, if it's important, we'll follow up. But the one thing that I forgot to, until there was some conversation in the last couple of days that reminded me of the David and Goliath question that had come up last week. And I told you I'd look into that, and that didn't even hit me until yesterday, because I just didn't hit my consciousness. But anyway, you all know the basic story of David and Goliath, right? That's in 1 Samuel chapter 17. I don't think we need to go back over that because everybody knows the story. It's famous, right? But what you don't know, presumably, since you were surprised when I said that there's a controversy about who actually killed Goliath, is the story in, sorry, let me see if I can do something about this. In 2 Samuel 21, and the actual verse is 19, but we'll start at verse 18. Sorry. After this, a battle took place with the Philistines at Gob. Then Sibbecai, the Hushathite, killed Saph, who was one of the descendants of the giants. Then there was another battle with the Philistines at Gob, and Elhanan, son of Ya'are Oregim, the Bethlehemite, killed Goliath, the Gittite, the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam, and it goes on from there. So in this text, it is someone named Elhanan who kills Goliath, not David. And the consensus of scholars, again, there's always disagreement in these sorts of things, but the consensus is that it was Elhanan who actually killed Goliath. And then, as often happens, the glory gets shifted to the famous guy, and people forget about poor little Elhanan, who probably actually was the one who did it.
I heard an account that Goliath was no great warrior type. He was a bit of an oaf. And, he was easy to beat, actually. He didn't have his full faculty. That was an account I heard.
I mean, we don't really have anything in the text other than he was tall.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, that's certainly possible that he was a big guy, but wasn't very, very sharp. But that's reading between the lines.
I used the word oaf.
Yeah, that's certainly possible. But I wanted to give you all that scripture so you know where I was coming from last week when I said that.
So why have we never heard that before in our Sunday school?
Well, because it's a kind of a downer. It punctures holes in our hero, and I'm going to perhaps put another hole in David today, depending on well, anyway. As we talk about Bathsheba, and this text,
Right.
David doesn't come out looking real good here either. But the biblical narrators, when they wrote the story of David, which is really the first biography not just in the Bible, just in Western literature. I mean, David is really a very round character. Think of other biblical characters. Is there anybody else in the Bible who is so fully drawn as David? Warts and all. I mean, that's the thing that's so wonderful about this material, is that they didn't. I mean, in Chronicles, we get a nice in-depth picture of David, sure enough. But in Samuel, this is David, warts and all. And the narrator wasn't afraid to show us David as he was, not cleaned up, which is kind of an amazing thing, that people are self-confident enough to show us their heroes as full human beings. You know, yeah.
I interrupt again. I remember as an English schoolboy, Scott of the Antarctic was a great hero. Well, it appears he was a sloth.
Yeah.
His wife got a ghostwriter to write his story after he died and made him out to be a great hero.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, even think about our heroes. I don't think more, Martin Luther King, was what we were talking about last time. I mean, he was a great man in my estimation, but he was a human being with flaws, and his flaws are well known. He was human. And we can think of any number of other, I mean, John Kennedy, same thing. By many people's estimation, a great man, but he definitely had his flaws. That's just, I mean, people are people. So
Please don't get too topical.
but because we live in the modern era, you can't escape the kind of scrutiny that is out there. So, but in the ancient world, it would have been it would be easy to avoid these sorts of stories. And yet with David, we got him, which is really quite remarkable. So anyway, when I was thinking about, women who were trailblazers in a political sense, the two women that leapt to mind were Bathsheba. She started, and we'll go over this material, as an abused woman. And then over the period of her life with David, she matured. And by the end, she was calling the shots. So we don't really know what happened in between, but we know that she took advantage of the opportunity that she had and didn't just, sulk or feel like a victim. She used the situation she had for the best that she could. And then we'll talk about the Queen of Sheba, who had a very different situation and is a remarkable woman in a very different way. So let's go to the next slide. This wonderful sculpture. We were talking about this sort of before class, this gorgeous sculpture, almost pornographic. It's very luscious, very sensual piece of artwork, which gives
It was pornographic. I'd say it was real.
Yeah, right.
Realistic,
yeah, and certainly can make you understand why David felt the lust that he did, because it's just
wanted to kill her husband.
Yeah. And so Bathsheba, Bat means daughter. So the name means daughter of Sheba, which doesn't really tell us a whole lot because we don't know exactly what Sheba means. She was married to a man named Uriah, who's called it the Hittite, which means that's his nationality. So there were various people from other areas that were part of part of the Israelite group. And then we've got scriptures, 2 Samuel 11 to 12 and 1 Kings 1 to 2. So we have 4 chapters that are that tell the story that includes Bathsheba, and essentially 4 acts in this play, if we want to think about it that way. Bathsheba's first appearance, the consequences of the adultery, the birth of Solomon, and the making of a king. So 4 acts in the play. And then this bronze by somebody named Benjamin Victor, whom I've never heard of, 16 inches tall. And there's also a 34-inch tall one available if anybody wants to go out and purchase one. Originally created in 2013. Anyway, you can read the details there. Again, just found it online and was attracted to it. So on to the next slide. Here we get the scriptures. So this is the initial meeting between Bathsheba and David. I'll read this one because I want to make some comments as we go along. In the spring, when kings go off to war, and that comment is important because they're saying that David should not have been where he was. He normally kings would be, off with their men at war, but David is not. David sent Joab along with his servants and all the Israelites, and they destroyed the Ammonites, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But David remained in Jerusalem. Not clear why, but he's not doing what kings are supposed to do. So that's already a negative comment on David. And then verse 2, one evening, David got up from his couch. And again, that's kind of negative. He's just lying around on his bed and was pacing back and forth on the roof of his palace. That's what's going on. Anyway, from the roof, he saw a woman bathing. It doesn't say she was on the roof. It says he was on the roof. But everybody pictures her as being on the roof, even though the text doesn't say that. Now, she may have been. Otherwise, you say, how could he have seen her? How could, she almost had to be in the roof for him to see her, but it doesn't say that.
I always thought he was just high enough up on the roof that he could see over the wall and see her bathing, where she might have thought because there were walls.
Oh, absolutely.
That she was in privacy.
Right. And people did normally go up to their rooftops to bathe, and they normally would have been private in that situation because normally other people couldn't see them. Only the king would have been high enough to see anybody. Reminds me, years ago, many years ago, I was in a house that had a back porch on the 2nd floor. And at some point, I went out there, not fully clothed, assuming that there wouldn't be anybody else out there. And right next door, somebody came out. And I scurried back inside very quickly. I was totally shocked that anybody else would be out. Anyway, yes, I'm sure she did not anticipate anybody would see her, whether she was, presumably she was on a roof, but that was a normal place to be, even though it doesn't say that. And bathing in those days, remember, they didn't have bathtubs, showers, they didn't have running water. Basically, what you did was sort of, what we would call a sponge bath out of a bowl. She probably wasn't completely naked, but she was probably, sort of disrobing and partially as she was cleaning herself up. At any rate, the woman was very beautiful. David sent someone and inquired about the woman. The report came back, isn't this Eliam's daughter Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? So David sent messengers to take her. So, the question is, somebody comes to her telling her the king is demanding her presence. Not clear what he wants her for. What choice does she have other than to go to the king? Especially when, I mean, it's not even, her husband is at war. Could be something to do with him. Anyway, when she came to him, he had sex with her. And then this next part, I don't like the New RSV translation. What it says is now she had been purifying herself after her monthly period. The point of translating it that way is to suggest that when she had sex with David, any child that she conceived would be David's. But that's a very strange way of translating the Hebrew, because what the Hebrew actually says is that she was purifying herself from her uncleanness, meaning that after she had sex with David, she felt unclean and she cleaned herself up. To translate it as a pluperfect, she had been cleaning herself from her uncleanness, like her period before she met David, is an unlikely translation of the Hebrew. So that's translators bringing an interpretation into their translation. I mean, it's possible, but it's a strained translation to put a pluperfect in there.
What Bible is this from?
New RSV. New RSV. I've been using New RSV as my sort of standard translation, even though I don't like it. But it's the one most people in your church, I assume, are most familiar with. It's sort of the standard one we use in academia, but there are many, many problems with it. This just being one example.
In our Bible classes always use the New International Version.
Okay.
Study Bible.
Okay. I didn't check to see what they do with this. They may well do the same thing. But at any rate, NIV is similar to New RSV. It has a slightly more conservative theological cast to it, only slightly. They are very similar in many ways. Anyway, then she returned home. The woman conceived and sent word to David. I mean, this is very terse. You know, everything's happening very fast here. I'm pregnant, she said. Then David sent a message to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite. So David is, spinning his response to this situation very fast. So Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked about the welfare of Joab and the army and how the battle was going. Then David told Uriah, go down to your house and wash your feet, because David wants Uriah to sleep with Bathsheba to cover up anything that might have happened. Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king was sent after him. However, Uriah slept at the palace entrance with all his master's servants, because he knew it wasn't appropriate. He's supposed to be at battle. He's not supposed to be at home with his wife having a pleasant time. So David asked Uriah, haven't you just returned from a journey? Why didn't you go home? 11, the chest and Israel and Judah are all living in tents. The chest? Oh, I guess the Ark of the Covenant. Uriah told David, and my master Joab and my master's troops are camping in the open field. How could I go home and eat, drink, and have sex with my wife? I swear on your very life, I will not do it. So the contrast between Uriah and David is stark. Uriah is a much better man in this story than David, because David should have been out there with him in the first place, but no, he's at home lying on his couch watching somebody else's wife. Then the next chapter, somebody else want to read now? I don't know if there's anything here I need to point out. Thank you.
You're on 2 Samuel 11.
Yes, 11 to 18, yeah.
Then David told Uriah, stay here one more day. Tomorrow I'll send you back. So Uriah stayed in Jerusalem that day. The next day, David called for him, and he ate and drank, and David got him drunk. In the evening, Uriah went out to sleep in the same place alongside his master's servants, but he did not go down to his own home. The next morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it with Uriah. He wrote in the letter, place Uriah at the front of the fiercest battle, and then pull back from him so that he will be struck down and die. So as Joab was attacking the city, he put Uriah in the place where he knew there were strong warriors. When the city's soldiers came out and attacked Joab, some of the people from David's army fell. Uriah the Hittite was also killed. Joab sent a complete report of the battle to David. When you have finished reporting all the news of the battle to the king, Joab instructed the messenger, if the king gets angry and asks you, why did you go so close to the city to fight? Didn't you know that they would shoot from the wall? Who killed Jerubaal's son Abimelech? Didn't a woman throw an upper millstone on top of him from the wall so that he died in Thebes? Why did you get so close to the wall? They then say, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead too. So the messenger set off, and when he arrived, he reported to David everything that Joab had sent him to say. The men overpowered us, the messenger told David. They came out against us in the open field, but we fought against them up to the entrance of the city gate. Archers shot down on your servants from the wall. Some of the king's servants died, and your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead too. David said to the messenger, say this to Joab. Don't be upset about this, because the sword is the way, taking the life of this person or that person. Continue attacking the city and destroy it. Encourage Joab. When Uriah's wife heard that her husband Uriah was dead, she mourned for her husband. After the time of mourning was over, David sent for her and brought her back to his house. She became his wife and bore him a son. But what David had done was evil in the Lord's eyes.
So an amazing story. David couldn't get Uriah to go sleep with her. So his plan B was to get Uriah killed. Yeah, just about as awful as you can imagine.
You're right about the women being strong then. She threw a millstone.
Right. That's another story, but that's another great story. So then, as you probably, the next slide, I didn't think we needed to read this whole story, but it's a lovely story how the prophet Nathan comes to David and tells him this story about this poor little ewe lamb and how it has gotten stolen. And David says, oh, that's terrible. It's terrible. And Nathan says, well, you're the man, right? And condemning, so clearly the word had gotten out what David had done. It's people in the court talk, they hear. And so Nathan knew what had happened, and he had the guts to go to David and to say, what you've done is not good. And Nathan lived to tell the tale, unlike some prophets who would tell that kind of thing and might get killed. But Nathan could do that. And so then, the birth and death of David and Bathsheba's first child, who did not live, as at least according to the story, punishment for, for what David had done. Of course, it punished Bathsheba too, and she'd not done anything wrong, because it appears that, the sex was in effect a rape. It's interesting, as I've taught this story over the years to my students. When I first started teaching it, students didn't want to see this as a rape. And partly, I think, and I've showed this movie quite a few times, I think it's 1951 story of David and Bathsheba, the movie David and Bathsheba. Many of you have probably seen this. It's a very romanticized version of the story. Haywood, Susan Haywood, right. And it's Gregory Peck who plays David, I think. And it's really twists the story. It turns it into this love story, and and it really has impacted the way we see this story. It's now 50 years later, and so after 50 years, given the women's movement and everything that's happened, I think we can begin to see this story of David and Bathsheba a little differently. But that movie really impacted the way we see this story. And of course, it was written right after World War II. And I think there was, at that point, Bathsheba was given a kind of agency in that movie that women wanted. So you can see how it might have been effective at that point. Yeah.
Has there ever been an interpretation that Bathsheba was a conniving?
Oh, yes.
female?
Oh, yes.
You know,
And of course, in the movie, she is depicted as
I
being
don't recall
right, and
that.
there are scholarly interpretations that see her that way.
Uh-huh.
And it's not impossible.
Yeah.
You can spin this different ways, because the text has gaps, as they say. You could read it that way. I think most people read it that she was innocent and basically raped, but you could read it that other way. It's not definitely not impossible to do that. So, and that's certainly the way the movie is reading
I
it.
see.
Yeah. Like I say, most people, at least most of my students these days, tend to read it the other way, but not 100%. That's one of the fascinating things about scripture. There's often gaps that you can read more than one direction.
We should ask ourselves what that says about us, how we see it.
Yeah, because it does say something about something about us, how we see it. What's happened to us, what are our experiences that shape the way we see these stories. Yeah, it says as much about us as about the stories. So anyway, then she gets pregnant again. Bathsheba gets pregnant again, and we get the birth of Solomon. And David destroyed important Ammonite cities. And 1 Kings 1, Adonijah declared himself king. This is one of David's sons. And then Nathan conspired with Bathsheba to have Solomon made king instead of Adonijah. And in 1 Kings 12, Adonijah was still angling for power. He came to Bathsheba asking for Abishag, the woman that David had slept with in his old age, as a warming, right, to keep him warm and so forth, not for sex, because he was beyond that. But when she asked Solomon, he refused, knowing that this represented kingship. So Bathsheba went from abused in the very early part of the story, assuming that she was innocent, possibly raped, to powerful queen mother, because at the end of the story, she's calling the shots. David's out of it. But now Bathsheba, in cahoots with Nathan, is making the determination of what's going to happen, who's going to be king. Of course, it's important that it be her son, because if it's her son, then she remains in power. If Adonijah becomes king, then God help her, as to what's going to happen. What? So,
I believe after Solomon became king, he killed a lot of,
he what?
he killed a lot of people.
Yeah, he did, and that was not unusual. I mean, it looks awful to us, but that was pretty much standard operating procedure to make sure that none of your potential rivals can do anything to you. So is, yeah, it's as bad as it looks to us. At least it was not something unusual for Solomon to be doing. He was doing what most people in that situation would do at that time. So, I mean, the interesting thing about Bathsheba is, she went from very little power or no power or little power at the beginning, depending on how you interpret it, to being a powerful political actor by the end of her life, even though she had no authority. She wasn't queen, but as doing what she needed to do to become queen mother, which was a position of great influence. It's interesting that she would be able to manipulate people and events so that she had that power at the end of her life. All right, so we're doing okay in time. So moving to the Queen of Sheba, and again, just a image that I found this time on Wikimedia. I guess I think I actually got it off Wikipedia, but this is an illuminated manuscript of Speculum Humanae Salvationis, pronounced something like that, from early 15th century. And I just thought it was a lovely image. And I assume that is supposed to be Solomon at his knees in front of her. I'm not really sure.
But did King Solomon ever meet Queen Sheba? Queen Sheba? That's not biblical, is it?
No, no, or maybe it's supposed to be David.
Yeah.
Um,
There was a story about Queen of Sheba going to check out the wisdom of King
right,
Solomon.
right, and that's what we got in the next slide,
Okay.
actually, yeah. So this is that story, which we also find in parallel text otherwise. Somebody want to read these 13 verses, I think, yeah. Just so you get that in your mind.
Well, continue.
Go ahead, yes, please.
When the Queen of Sheba heard reports about Solomon due to the Lord's name, she came to test him with riddles. Accompanying her to Jerusalem was a huge entourage with camels carrying spices, a large amount of gold, and precious stones. After she arrived, she told Solomon everything that was on her mind. Solomon answered all her questions. Nothing was too difficult for him to answer. When the Queen of Sheba saw how wise Solomon was, the palace he had built, the food on his table, the servants' quarters, the function and dress of his attendants, his cupbearers, and the entirely burned offerings that he offered at the Lord's temple, it took her breath away. The report I heard about your deeds and wisdom when I was still at home is true, she told the king. I didn't believe it until I came and saw it with my own eyes. In fact, the half of it wasn't even told to me. You have far more wisdom and wealth than I was told. Your people and these servants who continually serve you and get to listen to your wisdom are truly happy. Bless the Lord your God, because he was pleased to place you on Israel's throne. Because the Lord loved Israel with an eternal love, the Lord made you king to uphold justice and righteousness. The queen gave the king 120 kikars of
Yes,
gold,
yeah. Don't
a
know.
great quantity of spice and precious stones. Never again has so much spice come to Israel as when the Queen of Sheba gave this gift to King Solomon. Hiram's fleet went to Ophir and brought back gold, much almug wood, and precious stones. The king used the almug wood to make parapets for the Lord's temple and for the royal palace, as well as lyres and harps for the musicians. To this day, that much almug wood hasn't come into or been seen in Israel. King Solomon gave the Queen of Sheba everything she wanted and all that she had asked for, in addition to what he had already given her from his own personal funds. Then she and her servants returned to her homeland.
Thank you. So the reason I bolded that part in verse 13 is I think that's the basis on which all kinds of midrashic, sort of midrashic-like material developed, in which the Queen of Sheba and Solomon have an affair, and from that affair comes Menelik, who, or Menelik, I always want to pronounce it the way, Menelik, who founds the Ethiopian dynasty, royal dynasty. And there's all kind, I mean, the literature is vast that comes out of this story. The most famous, and I think I talked about it later here, is the royal saga, the Kebra Nagast, the glory of kings. But there's lots and lots and lots of other stuff that comes out of this story. It's just tiny little story we have in the Hebrew Bible. There's another version in the Quran. Yeah.
Is the land of Sheba Ethiopia?
No, not exactly. It's close by,
Okay.
but I've got a map here in a minute. So let's go into the next slide. We just, yeah, please.
She gave him all this stuff, but it sounds like he paid her.
Yeah, there was an exchange of gifts.
Yeah.
But in addition to the exchange of gifts, she gave him everything he wanted. And that comment, I think, is where all the sexual stuff comes from. Because they're both, and I should mention, this text is in there to make Solomon look good. She represents wisdom, and she had all these questions, and if he can answer all of her questions, then that makes him look really good. So the point of having it in here is to aggrandize Solomon, but of course, we reading it now find her rather very interesting. And I think most scholars don't think that she was historical, but there are some, like me, who think she was. So, and there is some evidence, but it's not as strong as we would like, but I'll tell you what we got. So first question, where was Sheba? So a team of archaeologists from the University of Hamburg in Germany said they discovered the Queen of Sheba's palace and an altar that may have once held the Ark of the Covenant in Aksum, which is in northern Ethiopia. I have to stop and think about that. A Christian king built a new palace over the 10th century BC structure, which probably didn't survive for very long, the university said in its statement. The altar, oriented toward the Star of Sirius, has 2 columns and may have been where the Ark of the Covenant, the holiest treasure of early Judaism, was kept until the first temple was built in Aksum. The Hamburg team, led by Helmut Ziegert, for 9 years investigated the origins of the Ethiopian state, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. The central purpose of the field trip was to find out how Judaism arrived in Ethiopia in the 10th century BC, to seek clues to the present location of the Ark, and so forth. So that's just a picture, I think, that accompanied the news release. When we returned our Ethiopian manuscript to Ethiopia in 2016, we did a field trip here and we saw this place. So this is real. We don't know for certain whether this structure, which has not been further investigated because of all the warfare that's going on in that area. So we don't know whether this is actually, her palace. It's the right period, but until further archaeological investigation can be done, and until somebody finds something in there with an inscription on it, this is just speculation. But it's fascinating that it's the right place, it's the right period, and these are very respectable archaeologists who are doing this work. So let's see, the researchers conjectured that the second palace was built by Menelik. Legend has it he was the son of Sheba and King Solomon. And my former New Testament colleague, Cain Felder, suggests that based on ancient evidence, the land of Sheba was on both sides of the Red Sea. Okay, and what partly supports this is that both the Ethiopians and the Muslims claim her. So the Ethiopians call her Bakeda, and the Muslims call her, I'm blocking it. It'll come to me. I may have it written down here somewhere. It's funny the things my brain blocks these days. So anyway, this map, the next picture slide is a map. And I may need to get closer to it to really see it. I can't see it.
Yeah.
Eyes aren't as good as they used to be either. Nothing works as well as it used to. What am I? Oh, okay. So do you see where it says Axum?
Yeah.
Right. So that's the ancient kingdom of Axum. And you can see it's roughly where Ethiopia is today. And if you see the Red Sea, what we call the Red Sea, and at the narrowest point, at sort of the southwest tip of Yemen, the sea is very narrow. It's only about 30 miles across there. So the thought is that Sheba was on both sides of the Red Sea, in the southwest tip of Yemen and the southeast tip of Axum. And that we've got what may be her palace in Axum, and there's definitely a palace of hers in over in Yemen.
And of course, that's very topical, that Red Sea, because that's where.
Yeah, right. So again, this is all speculative. We don't have at least the part on the west coast of the Red Sea is speculative. There is definitely and I shouldn't say it's definitely hers, but there is a site at Yemen that is claimed to be hers. But anyway,
You might repeat what you said, because you'll be off the camera for the Zoom.
oh, okay, right. So Cain Hope Felder suggests, based on ancient evidence, that Sheba was on both sides of the Red Sea. The southwest tip of Yemen and the southeast side of Axum, which is roughly modern Ethiopia. And that we have the evidence of a possible palace on the Ethiopian side, and there is a palace over on the Yemeni side that the Muslims believe that belonged to her. Again, we don't have the inscriptional evidence that we need to nail this, but maybe in the future, that's still a possibility.
Is there anything to indicate a relationship between Bathsheba's mother and the Queen of Sheba?
No, no,
No indication that Bathsheba was herself Ethiopian.
no, That would be cool, but nothing that I know of. And then in the next slide, midrashic legends about the queen. So according to some midrashic tales, when the queen came to see Solomon, she had 4 riddles. You know, she had all these questions to ask him. So you can imagine the kinds of things that get spun out of that. And these were all related to gender. His correct answers led to her conversion to Judaism, according to these tales. So in the first riddle, the Queen of Sheba asked, what are the 7 that issue and 9 that enter? The 2 that offer drink, the 1 that drinks. And Solomon answered, the 7 that issue are the 7 days of menstrual impurity. The 9 that enter are the 9 months of pregnancy. The 2 that offer drink are the breast, and the child is the one who drinks. Very interesting answers. And then the second and third riddles on the next slide, she asked him, how can a woman say to her son, your father is my father, your grandfather, my husband, you are my son, and I am your sister? And Solomon answered, the 2 daughters of Lot, who became pregnant by their father and bore sons. And then when the Queen of Sheba saw that he solved her riddles, she brought before him children who were of the same height and who were in like attire. And she asked him, distinguish between the males and the females. He made a sign to his eunuchs, who brought him nuts and roasted ears of corn, which they scattered before the children. The males who were not bashful collected them and tied them within the hems of their garments. The girls, however, were bashful, since their bodies would be revealed if they were to tie the undergarments, and therefore tied them within their outer garments. Solomon told the queen, these are the males, and these are the females. And she told him, you are exceedingly wise. And then the fourth riddle, this is on the next slide. Okay, almost there. Scott. Yep. The Queen of Sheba brought a number of people before Solomon, some circumcised, others uncircumcised, and she asked him, distinguish between the circumcised and the uncircumcised. Solomon immediately made a sign to the high priest to open the Ark of the Covenant. Those who were circumcised stood or bowed their bodies to half their height, while their countenances were filled with the radiance of the Shekinah, which is the, how do you define that? Sort of the glory of God, sort of, yeah. The uncircumcised, however, fell on their faces, and of course, he immediately knew. And she asked him, how did you know? He explained to her, from Balaam, the uncircumcised, of whom it is said, who beholds visions from the Almighty prostrate, but with eyes unveiled. If he did not prostrate himself, he would see nothing. I also learned from Job, for when the 3 friends of Job came to console him, he told them, I am not less than you. Anyway, so that's these are the midrashic tales that about Solomon's wisdom, and there are just tons and tons. There's some very negative things about the Queen of Sheba, because she was a foreign woman ruler. So there's all kinds of really negative things. Things like she had hairy legs and some very funny things. Maybe I'll have to send you the article that I did about her, just to give you some of that stuff.
The account I heard, she was quite satisfied with the two women and the baby. You know, that satisfied her with the wisdom of Solomon.
Yeah.
This is a lot more detail.
And then this last slide is just a picture of typical Ethiopian art, picture of the Keber Nagast. And there's a style that, you know, when you see the Ethiopian art, the collection that we have, I think I may have mentioned this to you before, of our 151 manuscripts, you know, books, and then 87 magic scrolls. You see this sort of art in the books. I mean, not throughout the books, but there's illumination here and illumination there, and it's definitely a distinct style that you don't see quite anywhere else. So thank you all very much. I guess we're out of time now.
Alice, tell us what's up starting next week.
Let's see, I don't, am I not coming next week?
You are coming next week.
I am coming next week. Okay, I was confused about whether, so it's February 4th and 18th and 25th?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Then we're starting into the trajectories in the Hebrew Bible series. The basic idea being that, like every other society, Hebrew culture evolved, and the legal world also evolved. So if you ask, what was the Old Testament attitude toward anything, like women or slaves or tithing, you can't just look up one text and have the answer, because it changed over time. And the reason this is important is because the trajectories move, for the most part. Sometimes this is one step forward, two back, or two forward and one back, but for the most part, the trajectories are moving in the direction of greater justice, that essentially are laying the foundation for where we are today, and where we continue to move, hopefully, toward greater justice for people who are oppressed or marginalized, or whatever word we want to use. I mean, that trajectory continues into the New Testament, and these principles we are continuing to play out even today as we work toward creating a better society. So we're going to look at slaves, women, and sexual minorities are the sort of the three areas.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go
in peace.
Getting back right now.